Just as Midtown Manhattan was still waking up on December 4th, 2024, UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson was walking into the Hilton Hotel on 6th Avenue. It would have been impossible for the 50-year-old to know that, according to police, fatal danger was lurking outside, quote, lying in wait for several minutes. Right before 7 a.m., a gunman, his face obscured by the hood of his jacket, came up from behind and shot Thompson multiple times in what was described as a brazen, targeted attack. The suspect fled the scene, spurring a days-long nationwide manhunt. 5 days later, 26-year-old Luigi Mangione was arrested in a Pennsylvania McDonald and, according to police, was found with a ghost gun that matched the shell casings found at the scene, what was described as a handwritten manifesto, and a notebook that voiced his frustrations with the country's healthcare industry. Despite the fact that Mangione is suspected of gunning someone down in the middle of New York City, since the shooting, he's gained online support. While most find the murder abhorrent, he's been hailed a hero by some who see the shooting as an act of taking on a greedy health insurance industry. Mangione has pleaded not guilty to all charges against him. Criminal defense attorney Danny Rubin joins Forbes True Crime to break it down. Hi everybody, I'm Brittany Lewis, one of the hosts of Forbes True Crime. Joining me now is criminal defense attorney Danny Rubin. Danny, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me on. I always appreciate being here.
Today we're going to be breaking down one of the most high-profile cases we've seen in the last year, and that is the case, or I really should say cases, against Luigi Mangione. The 27-year-old is facing a total of 20 counts across state and federal courts, all linked to the killing of UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson. The counts span from murder to stalking to terrorism, and there's also gun-related charges in there. We're expected to see Luigi Mangione in court later this month for the New York State case. But to start off the conversation, can you break down the state and federal cases for us, and what are some of the differences?
Sure. So there are currently 2 different states that have cases against Mr. Mangione, and there's a federal case pending in the Southern District of New York. As far as the Pennsylvania case goes, again, there's Pennsylvania and New York cases against him. Pennsylvania seems to take a backseat to all this because he was arrested for charges of having a false ID and a firearm. But those are much, much lesser charges compared to those in New York, one of which is obviously for terrorism, and in the federal district of New York, which is for murder. So that case is going to take a back seat, and they've even said that we're going to hold off adjudicating this until those other cases have been resolved first. So that's the first thing to know, really, who's going to be in order. Now, the question is, who's going to get preference as far as New York State or the Southern District of New York? I know that can get confusing, so let's just call this the New York State case and the federal case. New York is vying for the opportunity to tackle this first because the prosecutors want to have their day in court first. Everyone wants to have preference, whereas the federal prosecutors really potentially want to go first. I mean, essentially, they want to have their day in court. So everyone's sort of chomping at the bit to have this done first.
From your perspective as a criminal defense attorney, what do you think the defense wants?
I think the defense wants the federal case to go first. There was a lingering terrorism charge which they have to resolve in the state case, and we'll get to that in a minute. But the federal cases tend to take a lot less time. They tend to move a lot quicker. And then there's the issue of the death penalty to resolve, which they're currently in the process of resolving, what the death penalty is going to be sought and whether there are certain aggravating factors that will allow the government to pursue the death penalty. To resolve the death penalty issue first is probably most important, because if the death penalty is assigned in that case, there isn't really much more to do on the state's end. You can't get 2 death penalties in a certain case. And getting life when there's already a death penalty makes no sense. It's a waste of time. So I believe they want to resolve that first. There also is the issue of the terrorism charge. Terrorism involves the coercion of a populace using murder, kidnapping, or some other heinous violent crime to essentially coerce a population of a certain idea or ideal. That is a very contentious issue on the state side. And they want to resolve the federal issues before going to that, for resolving those issues in the state.
What do you make of that terrorism charge? Because obviously I'm not condoning gunning someone down in broad daylight on the streets of New York, but even some mass shooters don't get slapped with a terrorism charge. Do you think that's going to stick?
It's a very good question. It's hard to say at this point, but I think that the state of New York may have overcharged that in this case. To prove terrorism, you have to prove that you were trying to coerce a population by using some sort of heinous violent crime like kidnapping, murder, something along those lines. I don't think that this was an idealized attack intent to sway the hearts and minds of others. I think that based on the evidence that's presented so far, that's publicly available, again, I have to say what's publicly available because I'm not one of his attorneys, we're sort of relying on his manifesto and it seems he had a lot of hatred for the system that impinged on his ability to receive health care and caused him significant pain. Obviously, this is not the right way to go about resolving those issues. I mean, it's totally a wrong way of doing that. But when he did it, it seems more personally motivated than idealistically motivated. So I think that the prosecution is going to have a very difficult time proving terrorism. And it seems like a very lofty goal that they want to pursue. And it obviously grabs headlines. But murder is something that's more accessible. Terrorism might be something that's more difficult to prove.
I want to read something that his attorney wrote in a filing and then get your perspective on it. This is what it says, quote, "As a result of unprecedented prosecutorial one-upmanship, Mr. Mangione now faces 3 simultaneous prosecutions in 3 different jurisdictions, one of which is seeking the death penalty, while another is seeking life imprisonment, all for one set of facts." What are your thoughts on their argument that this could be double jeopardy? Do you think it is?
So I don't believe it's double jeopardy because you can be prosecuted for the same issue if it offends 2 different jurisdictions' laws. Basically, what the government is going after in the federal case is they're claiming that Mr. Mangione crossed state lines to stalk and kill someone. That I believe is separate and apart from what the New York State is comparing. They're trying to prosecute Mr. Mangione for terrorism-related issues, basically carrying out a killing related to an ideological preference meant to coerce or sway the public using violence. I think these are 2 very different things. It actually might be why the state is trying to pursue a terrorism case and not specifically murder, trying to frame it a different way. And as far as Pennsylvania goes, they're not even alleging anything related to the killing because no killing happened in Pennsylvania. So I think that when it comes to double jeopardy, I think you can certainly make the argument, and you should make the argument. But will it be successful? It's difficult to say at this point.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot that remains to be seen. But in your opinion, does it seem like everyone here, state and federal, are trying to get a bite of this apple because it's just one of those blockbuster cases? And who has the stronger case? Do you think the federal court has the stronger case because they don't have the terrorism charge?
So it's actually exactly the phrase I would use to describe the situation. In fact, many lawyers use the phrase "bite at the apple" to describe similar issues like this. I don't really believe, just to get the easy issues out of the way, I don't really believe Pennsylvania needs to jump into the fray on this because there are already 2 cases in 2 different jurisdictions with significantly more serious charges than the ones levied in Pennsylvania. But yes, I believe that the 2 jurisdictions are trying to one-up each other. Obviously, the state of New York and the federal judiciary have been, or sorry, not federal judiciary, federal prosecutors, the DOJ, have been at odds for the last few years during this administration. And I think they really want to assert their own dominance and sovereignty by claiming this case. Do I think that one should have the edge over the other? I think that the terrorism case is going to be significantly harder to make than the federal murder case. Whether if the federal murder case resolves in some sort of death penalty issuance, that also remains to be seen. I think what you're going to see over the next few weeks, the next few months, are briefs meant to shore up or at least show why the government is pursuing the death penalty and what those aggravating factors are. Significantly they have to prove grave risk of death to additional persons. The shooting happened in public, that it was heinous or cruel or depraved in the manner of committing the offense. It seemed like an execution, and that there was substantial planning and premeditation. And from the manifesto, it definitely shows that that's a possibility. Whether or not the court wants to allow the government to pursue the death penalty is, of course, up to the judge.
I want to get a little bit into that handwritten manifesto that police found on Luigi Mangione in Altoona, Pennsylvania. It said things like this, quote, "To the feds, I'll keep this short because I do respect what you do for our country. To save you a lengthy investigation, I state plainly that I wasn't working with anyone." And it also included this. "Frankly, these parasites simply had it coming. A reminder, the U.S. has the #1 most expensive healthcare system in the world, yet we rank roughly number 42 in life expectancy." I know that Luigi Mangione has pled not guilty to all of these charges, but do you think that manifesto, does that establish guilt and motive?
I definitely think that it establishes some sort of motive. I don't know about guilt, because again, we're talking separately from intent versus the actual action, or really, as we refer to in law, the mens rea and the actus reus, which for those of us who don't know Latin is the mindset of the crime and the action of the crime. I think that the manifesto, if it's even admissible, which is obviously something we should talk about, but if it's even admissible, that may go to intent and mindset. It may also go to his not having a certain intent and mindset if it shows that he was under the influence of drugs, or if he was experiencing some sort of mental health crisis. As far as the actions go, the actions are pretty cut and dry. He shot somebody. Someone saw him do it. And whether or not that evidence is challenged and successfully challenged in court at trial is going to be interesting to watch.
Do you think the manifesto will even make it? Because his team's arguing the police unlawfully searched him in Altoona, and the evidence that they found there was the manifesto, a ghost gun that matched the shell casings on the scene, a fake ID. And if that evidence is tossed, I mean, what does that do to the case against Luigi Mangione?
If that evidence is tossed, I mean, which it depends, because each individual piece of evidence is weighed independently. But right now, at least in the state court, is a motion pending to dismiss certain statements and articles found in Luigi Mangione's backpack, indicating that they were the product of an unlawful search and unlawful interrogation. But yeah, I think that every piece of evidence that doesn't come in certainly hurts the case for the prosecution. Would it cripple the case, or would it be terminal for the case? That remains to be seen. But as a prosecutor, you want this evidence in very badly, especially the manifesto, especially for New York. They would love to read this manifesto in open court because it at least purports to show some sort of ideological component to this killing. Whereas it's probably less important for the government because, again, if they're seeking the death penalty, which is the highest penalty you can seek for murder, and they're not seeking any terrorism charge, they're just seeking murder, their aggravated factors are more related to the action as opposed to the intent.
I want to talk about some of the other evidence here aside from that manifesto and notebook that was found on his person, according to police. The gun found in his possession also matched the shell casings found at the scene. Fingerprints of his were found on items near the scene. Surveillance footage shows who police say is him at a hostel and then at the crime scene, and the ID used to check into that hostel was found on his person. You're a criminal defense attorney. You see that evidence. What's the most damning piece there, in your opinion?
It's difficult to say. Any good attorney would say it depends. It really depends on the evidence that backs up that evidence. For example, I know it's a very kind of roundabout way to put this and could be confusing, but really, in order to get any sort of video in, like the surveillance video, someone's got to come in and authenticate that video. They've got to say, hey, I'm a security guard working at this location, or the person who's in charge of controlling the video cameras. On such and such time, I gave this video to the police, and I can verify that this is in fact the video that I gave them or the video that I saw. If you don't have that, you can't introduce the video. So you might have this really great piece of evidence that you just can't get in because you can't find the person, or they lose chain of custody over that item. It really just depends. So it really is whatever you can introduce at trial. As far as if you can introduce all of that, let's just say all of it comes in. I'd say the most damning piece of evidence is it depends on what the surveillance video shows. Obviously, if it shows him shooting someone, the question is not, did they find the gun or the murder weapon? But if he's on camera and you can actually see him clearly and he's shooting somebody, that's a pretty damning piece of evidence. And it's damning because it doesn't rely on unwitnessed testimony. It's documentary, provided that it wasn't messed with or tampered with, and you'd have to prove that in court. It's something you can play over and over and over again for the jury. And it is a video of a crime which took place. And if it does show the actual shooting, that's a pretty difficult thing to watch over and over and over again.
And we know that he pleaded not guilty to all of those charges against him. And I know that we don't know everything that his team knows. We don't know everything the prosecution knows. But based on what we do know, what do you think his defense looks like now? Or what do you think is his best line of defense? Or does that just depend on if all of that evidence is in or not? What do you think?
So his best line of defense is an entire defense. And I'll break that down. Essentially what that means is, and it's exactly what his attorneys are doing, they're attacking the sufficiency of the evidence with regard to the terrorism charge in the state case. They're attacking the admissibility of the evidence in the state case. They're attacking the death penalty and whether that can be pursued in the federal case. And they'll have the same issues of evidence collection in the federal case as well. Right now, it seems like the case in the federal court is going to go sometime in 2026. So they do have some time to challenge that evidence. And the first and foremost, the thing to do is determine whether or not the death penalty is going to be sought by the government, and whether or not the judge will allow the government to pursue the death penalty. But really, you want to present a complete defense, start to finish. And really, what his attorneys are doing right now is they are planning for trial in 2026 and beyond for the federal and state cases. They are going to be determining what their arguments are, what evidence they need to present will be, what the defenses will be, what the prosecutors are going to say, what the prosecutors will produce, what kind of jurors they need in a trial. And any good attorney is going to start doing this from the very beginning, and then you work backwards. And whatever is left that's unchallenged or is determined to be admissible by either the federal or state judges in either case is what they're ultimately going to have to plan a trial around. But they are attacking everything and everyone, and that's what they should be doing. And for anyone who's watching this, it's important to reiterate: the prosecutors, both in the state and federal levels, have the burden here. They are the ones that need to prove their case, not the defense. Everyone is presumed innocent. So the prosecutors have the job to prove otherwise. His attorneys will know this and should know this and will be actively trying to assert a defense. But at the end of the day, if there is any reasonable doubt as to any of the charges in these cases, a jury should acquit him on those charges.
I do want to talk about the jury because you and I talked about at the beginning of this conversation just how high profile this case is because it's received national coverage. Luigi Mangione was perp-walked off a helicopter flanked by police and even the mayor of New York City, Eric Adams. Do you think that with all of this coverage, there's a risk of the jury being tainted?
I think as we get closer to trial, you're going to have motions from the defense or the prosecution, potentially saying that they can't get a decent jury or an impartial jury in the district. It really depends on what's going to happen and on what news coverage takes place and what the sentiment is. In a federal case, it's actually pretty easy to pick a jury. The judge generally picks a jury. There are usually fewer choices in as far as the attorneys are concerned and how a jury is picked. The judge pretty much does everything, and it's done very quickly. In a newsworthy case like this, it may take a little longer. But in a state case, where you have potentially unlimited preemptory challenges, meaning you have unlimited challenges to any member of the jury, jury selection can take days or weeks, potentially. So can he get a fair trial here? I think ultimately you can find 12 to 14 to 24 people who are going to be impartial, at least claim they can be impartial. And I just don't think that it needs to move out of the state to do that.
I'm curious on the flip side, a lot of people in this country have serious gripes with the healthcare system. A lot of Americans really are one health catastrophe away from bankruptcy. And Luigi has received an onslaught of support that's not just the fringes. People have said things that I support him too. I don't support murder, but he might have had a point. And that's not just fringe talk on the dark web. I mean, do you think there's the possibility here of jury nullification?
Certainly. And I think that, in all honesty, I think that his attorneys might be reliant somewhat on it. They are going to play out the fact that this was, that healthcare was, is not working for a lot of people, that he was frustrated about this. Not necessarily meant to turn to the country in an ideological way, because that would be playing into the state prosecutor's claim for terrorism. But I think they may be looking for people who sympathize with Mangione. And I know this is a very hot button issue considering Charlie Kirk's death yesterday. And it should be reiterated that murder and violence is never a solution to a personal, political, legal issue. It just isn't. But whether or not people feel for his struggle, his journey, his pain, his ideals, that may factor into how a jury ultimately decides.
What do you make of Mangione? Like I said, but I'm going to say it one more time. He has pleaded not guilty. You're innocent before proven guilty. But people have made him somewhat of a hero. They see him as someone who's standing up to a greedy, corrupt healthcare system. The December 4th legal committee, which raised money for his legal fund, said they raised over $1 million for his defense from over 28,000 individual donations. What are your thoughts on that, and how much does that impact the case?
So tackling that from the easiest part of that question, more funds, a bigger war chest means generally better defense. You can pay for more lawyers and for better legal services. You can pay for experts. You can pay for focus groups and even focus juries, which is actually a thing. You can essentially pay for more time for many of those attorneys that are helping you, and more of them. So yes, a bigger war chest generally means a better defense. About how he's getting that money and what people think about him, I don't know if I'm qualified to talk about that, but I can say that it is certainly alarming in this country that people are resorting to violence to resolve their political, ideological, or personal issues. Violence is never the answer.
I'm curious what you're looking out for next. His next court appearance is supposed to be later this month in September. This is for the New York State case. So what are you looking out for next when it comes to the cases against Luigi Mangione?
So first and foremost, as far as the state case is concerned, we're looking at whether or not the case is going to proceed before the federal case. We're looking at whether the evidence that's been requested to be suppressed by the defense is actually going to be suppressed, and what will be suppressed, if anything. And also we're looking at, in the federal case, whether or not the death penalty is going to be sought, which most likely it will be, but whether the court will allow the government to assert the death penalty using its rationale of aggravating factors in the commission of the murder.
Well, there's certainly a lot to look out for in this case, and there are going to be developments, it seems, for a long time. And as we get them, I hope you can come back on and break it down from your perspective. Danny Rubin, I always appreciate our conversations. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.